welcome to First Things First. I'm Jenna Wolfe. That's the Hall of Famer, Cris Carter. That is Nick Wright. Before you can say anything, I'm holding my own L this morning. That's what I'm doing.
And on behalf of all the Celtics organization, more importantly, are you holding my money?
I do owe you a little bit of money. I'm going to let it ride.
You owed me money before last night.
And I let it ride that time.
Ride.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I mean...
You know me, you know where I live, you know where my children go to school. So I can let it ride.
I know, I mean, wow. I mean, it's not that serious at the moment. But it's good to know that you and I are on the same wavelength.
Why don't you tell the fine folks at home when I texted you this morning? Because
Jenna likes to text me at 1:30 in the morning for reasons I still haven't understood yet, Cris Carter. So
you want in on that? I can get you on part of my texting routine as well.
I think he's in on this.
You want me to start and tell you why I lost money last night?
Exactly right.
Why don't we do that part? We got ourselves a series now. For anyone who doesn't believe in home court advantage, I present to you the NBA's Eastern Conference Finals, where if you're Boston, you only win at home. And if you're Cleveland, you too only win at home. Cavs beat the Celtics last night to tie up this series at 2 games apiece. LeBron James put up an easy 44 points in the win. These two teams now head back to Boston for the start of a best-of-3. So, Cris Carter, I start with you. Tell me how this was done. How were the Cavs able to win Game 4?
Well, one thing is the Celtics and the story on the road. It's been well documented. They got one win in Philadelphia in game number 3. The other games, most of those games, they haven't even been in the game. They are not the same type of team on the road. But how the Cavs got it done in game number 4 was making shots early, getting off to the fast start so their role players can play with confidence. And LeBron James playing a great all-around game, especially offensively, was really special. Very, very rare you're going to be able to score that many points, which he did in 44 and only shoot the ball 28 times. You don't see it too much in the NBA. So LeBron, functioning at a high level, being very, very efficient offensively, only needs a little bit of support. And at this point in the series where teams are starting to figure out what the other teams are doing, the young genius, and some people call the best coach in the NBA, doesn't seem like he can get the type of looks that he's getting for them offensively that they got in the previous 3 series and games 1 and 2 in Boston. So those are the stories where we are. That's how Cleveland gets win number 2 in game number 4 last night.
All right, so I want to address things Cris mentioned in reverse order. Start with Brad Stevens. The reality is Ty Lue has made some adjustments in games 3 and 4 that Brad Stevens has not adjusted to. This game was lost in the first quarter. In that first quarter, Al Horford got 2 shots. That made it 6 total shots for the Celtics' best player in the 5 opening quarters being played in Cleveland. They were outscored by 46 points in those opening 5 quarters in Cleveland. That is an adjustment Brad Stevens needs to figure out how to make, where the Celtics have been at an enormous advantage all year long, where I've talked about them starting games up essentially 10-0 before the ball is tipped because of how they're going to be out of timeouts. Ty Lue is playing him to a stalemate out of timeouts, and the Celtics have been awful where they are typically great. That end of the quarter stuff, understanding time, score, situation. There was a play last night where Stevens is screaming for his guys to take it out. They don't. They end up, Jaylen Brown, I think, ends up missing a dunk, goes back down the other way. So execution-wise, they haven't been as good as they had been in the postseason, home or away, but particularly at home. On LeBron, it was an odd LeBron game. Only 3 assists. 7 turnovers, most of them totally needless turnovers, trying to make the A triple-plus pass when he didn't need to. But the way he scored those 44 points, it was methodical, and it was if you watched the game without ever checking a box score, I don't think you'd ever thought he had 44, because he never had one giant burst. He had 11 in the first, 11 in the second, 13 in the third, 9 in the fourth. It was, if such a thing exists, a quiet 44-point game from LeBron, particularly because he wasn't also getting other guys involved with the assists. And then lastly, the Cavs played 1 great quarter of defense. They played a great first quarter of defense. Then I thought they lapsed back into a lot of their bad defensive tendencies that had hurt them in Boston. But when you win the first quarter by 15 points and the other team's offensively challenged, it's going to be hard for them to mount a sustained comeback.
Have the Cavs figured out now, do you think, how to beat Boston, how to deal with their adjustments, how to contain Al Horford? Is this the kind of play you're expecting to see now when it shifts back to Boston?
I mean, it's a great question. I thought that even though they lost game 2, and going back, looking at game 2 yesterday before game 4 was played, I thought that Cleveland gained some control, even though they didn't win game 2. They played 192 minutes, Jenna, and the Celtics have trailed 122 of them. So it's 2-2. And sometimes it's when you get the wins and when you get the losses. But I would say right now, the Cleveland team, in a 3-game series, Cleveland is in more control than I think. Do I trust them a little bit better? Yes, I do, because I believe they can win 1 game in Boston. And what the Celtics has shown me on the road, I don't think they can win that 1 game coming back to Cleveland, game number 6.
Cece broke it down by a minute-by-minute standpoint, but the Celtics won the first and second half of game 1 and the second half of game 2. So there have been 8 halves of basketball. Those are the 3 halves the Celtics won. Cleveland controlled the first half of game 2, and they've controlled every part of the games except for a stretch in the fourth quarter yesterday of these 2 games back in Cleveland. And once again, and this is what is, I think, concerning for Boston. Boston loses game 3 because the Cavs go 17 of 34 from 3. Yesterday, they only make 8 threes. Yesterday, they turn the ball over nearly 10 times more than Boston, much like game 3. LeBron gets all this help, but no one gets even 15 points. Right. And so it was a multitude of players chipping in, 7 here, 9 here, 11 here. But Kevin Love had a bad game, saved 2 plays in the fourth quarter. JR, for the second straight game, yeah, he hit 3 threes, but that was the entirety of his offensive contributions. It's not like the Celtics are being slayed by, well, Love went 25 and 18 and there was just no answer for him. The Cavs are getting a little bit from a lot of guys, and they've had 2 consecutive really good LeBron James games.
One thing that's been a big difference is the overall energy of with the Cavs and how much energy they're exerting on the defensive end. If you say, well, what is the difference with them not playing? They play defense like a team that could try to win a championship. They have in those 2 games in Cleveland. You mentioned after that first quarter, the big first quarter, not necessarily the defense you'd want to see the other 3, but in the 8 quarters that they've played in Cleveland, big difference in the energy output on the defensive end.
So then you look at home court advantage, and if that is really such a thing, or if the Celtics got outplayed and will continue to get outplayed as this series moves forward. It seems from watching the game, yeah, maybe no one else had a ton of points other than LeBron, but they kind of figured out how to contain the Celtics.
Well, Terry Rozier's a big problem for the Celtics right now. I understand Rozier, he had 16 points and 10 assists.
Statistically, he had a decent.
But he shot terribly from the field. He made some awful decisions. And defensively, if he's on the court, he is the mismatch every single Cleveland Cavalier is going after.
Yeah.
And if Rozier's not out there, Shane Larkin's hurt, now you're in a situation, is Marcus Smart going to play the point? Or are we going to ask Jaylen Brown to play the point? The Celtics, I think everyone at this table would agree with this. I'm almost certain Brad Stevens would agree with this. The Celtics play for their season on Wednesday. Like, if they lose on Wednesday, that's a wrap for them. The Cavs can lose Wednesday and potentially be okay. The Celtics play for their season Wednesday. Not a lot of time between, as we sit here Tuesday morning, and the game Wednesday evening to make the counter adjustments to Ty Lue's adjustments.
Yeah, and that first half of the game in game number 5 becomes the most important half of basketball in the 2017-2018 season. Because as we saw, the momentum, when the game switched game 2 to game 3 in Cleveland, we saw Cleveland take control of what now we know to be 2 games. We only saw the first half in game number 3. Can the Celtics do that in game number 5? I believe is very, very important.
So LeBron James gets a quiet 44 points, if that is
44.
such a thing, and this series is tied at 2 games apiece. Coming up, will missing a key player slow down the Golden State Warriors tonight? We'll preview that series next on First Things First.
At Buffalo Wild Wings, we'll admit that we often go overboard with our limited time offerings. We just can't help ourselves. Take our new signature sampler. For $15, you get wings and 3 shareable options like fried pickles or cheese curds. Then there's our aptly named over-the-top nachos, a literal mountain of crispy tortilla chips loaded with your choice of pulled pork or honey barbecue chicken, corn, jalapenos, and more. Then top it all off with our new Platinum Margarita. Go overboard with us today at Buffalo Wild Wings. Wings, beer, sports. Available for a limited time while supplies last. Please drink responsibly.
Rockets Warriors in just a second, but first, Marcus Smart blocks LeBron, outlets to Terry Rozier. Rozier throws the alley-oop to Tatum. That's a play.
Was a good play. Good help defense by Marcus Smart, saving the ball, not under the bucket, saving it, giving it some air. Nice transition bucket, rare bucket, transition bucket by the Celtics.
And the most impressive thing of this was the time of the game. This was with seconds left in the quarter. They had to go that fast down the quarter.
0 dribbles.
Expire. Exactly right.
Next, game-changing block by Tristan Thompson on Terry Rozier.
Jenna, game-changing is not too strong of a way to put it. That would have cut it to 8, and then the Cavs went down the other side and got it back to 12 to keep the
great two-game sequence by Tristan Thompson. The energy that he brought, the change in assignment by Ty Lue, putting him in the starting lineup, might be the move of the series.
And finally, Kevin Love throwing a beautiful full-court pass. Watch LeBron get up over 2 Celtics and score. Watch the pass, though.
This is what he used to do in high school, like our boy Joe, all-state wide receiver, before he breaks his wrist.
Nice,
and
Joe.
they retiring, the LeBron James, they retired him. Baker Mayfield's in the house. He's jealous. LeBron's not playing across the street, across town.
See, more impressive, though, the pass or the catch?
The pass.
Oh, so you always surprise me, man. I'm always surprised by your answer.
The catch was impressive, though, because he caught it with his left hand. He was able to hold him off with his right hand and forearm and was able to catch it with his left.
Did you get that?
I got it.
Awesome.
We might need to bring back Hall of Fame hands today for that.
Slightly different NBA story out west where the Warriors lead the Rockets 2-1 in their best of 7. Rockets hoping not to repeat what happened in Game 3 when they got blown out by 41 points. Hoping to contain Steph Curry, who went off for 35 points, and hoping to avoid a tough 3-1 deficit to the behemoth Warriors. Rockets head coach Mike D'Antoni not worried, because you got to have faith.
Right now, to me, Golden State has all the pressure. They got to win tomorrow night. You know, we should come in with a little bit of swagger and giddy up in our game and see if we can get it.
Swagger and giddy up. You've been really enjoying Mike D'Antoni's postseason.
I love Mike D'Antoni, man. I mean, he's just lying all the time, but it is entertaining.
Wait, what?
I mean, none of it's true. The pressure's on Golden State. I understand what he's trying to say. He's trying to say, if they lose, we have home court back.
Well, listen, you've been coaching too long in this league. Just say what you're trying to say. Don't have us read between the lines. That's an idiotic statement.
So the question is, who's under more pressure? Well, considering the fact that since the Warriors got Kevin Durant, they haven't lost a single home playoff game. They've never been tied in a series aside from 0-0. And no one's ever taken them to 6, much less 7 games. I would say the team that could fall down 3-1.
What do you mean they've never been tied in a series?
Other than 0-0, a team's never tied them in a series. Never won 1, 2-2. They've been up 2-0 in every series they've
dominated every playoff series.
Well, the Houston series, they were
prior to the Houston series, they'd never been tied in a series. I apologize.
Yes.
They have not lost a home game, and no one has taken them 6 games since Durant's been there. So obviously the team that could go down 3-1 to that team is the team under more pressure. This is a game the Rockets have to win to have a shot to win the series. Golden State does not have to win this game to have a shot in this series.
Mike D'Antoni, you guys let me know, what's a bigger series he's ever been in than this one? Forget about Game 4. Has he ever been in a bigger series than this one?
He's been in, I think, one as big, a conference finals with Nash, but never a bigger one.
Tell me one series bigger than than this one.
Never.
None?
Never.
What about James Harden? He been in a bigger series? The finals.
As a sixth man, different responsibility.
Okay, what about Chris Paul?
No.
Oh, he's never been to the finals.
Right.
So the team that has all the trophies, all the pedigrees, all the MVPs.
They have more pressure.
They have more. This is, to me, I had a problem when he said something like this during the season. as far as the 65 wins, what that was going to warrant them, like as if that was some type of award, like that's a trophy. Like if you don't win the NBA championship, you're just a team that had a great regular season. So I just hate when a coach just blatantly just lies. Like, give us some information that's going to help us as fans. Like, don't try to turn it around like we don't know what's going on. All the pressure is on you. Giddy up or swagger. I love to see Caucasians always talk about swagger. Like, to me, that's like that's one of the funnier things I've ever.
Jenna's face.
Yeah,
Oh,
like,
God,
seriously,
Jenna's
like,
face is. Can someone please that can make GIFs on the internet? Or
I just love how they've added that to their vocabulary. Oh, swagger.
I learn every day.
All right, let me ask.
I'm learning every day. And I put that in on Wednesday, so I don't want to take it out quite yet.
Let me ask you a question, Chris Carter.
Well, it's been out for a while.
What about the aspect of talking to your team through the media? If he's trying to communicate to his team in the locker room, guys, pressure's on them. They got to defend home court.
I thought you're trying to tell the team not to listen to the media. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say, okay, team, we're going to block out everything, because that's what most coaches do.
But I don't think that's what D'Antoni's done. D'Antoni's a different. I haven't heard him say we're blocking out the noise.
Let me tell you what you have to do with professional athletes. You can't lie to them, all right? Now, if you can tell them in a meeting, hey, guys, I'm going to send a different message to the media, like you have to stay on the same page. Why all of a sudden now the players and the coach aren't on the same message points? Typically, you hear the coach, you hear the players say some version of that. After game number 3 loss, what did the coach say? The team was soft. Harden, what did Harden say? Soft. He said the same thing that the coach said. So you can't be trying to talk to the team through the media when you're telling the team not to listen to the media.
You think D'Antoni's telling his guys that the pressure's all on the Warriors
I think he is, and I think that's actually, unfortunately, potentially a bit of an indictment on the players on the Rockets. Because here's the thing. When we talk about the best player in the series, we just talked about LeBron, right? At no point would his coach say to him in a must-win game, pressure's on the other guys. He would say to him, we have to win. You know we have to win. Go do what is expected of you. Because he has a track record and history of rising to the occasion. I think Mike D'Antoni, if this is his message to the guys, which I believe it is because he knows that as great as James Harden is and as great as Chris Paul is, not necessarily the guys who play the best under the most pressure. They are guys who play better thinking, oh, this
So you think D'Antoni thinks he knows his players better? Like, he's only been with Chris Paul 7 months, and he knows those players better to send out some message that's not true?
I think D'Antoni is trying to convince CP3 and James Harden the pressure's on the Warriors.
That's just hard for me to concede. That's hard. That's a hard conclusion to try to pick, because coaches, they don't do things like that. Like, you can't try to play mind games with in a championship series. You can't, unless you've got a long history with these players, and I don't believe him to have that, or a long history of having success. I don't believe you can draw those conclusions from that coach, what he's trying to do to his star players to relieve pressure from them.
All right, so let's get into this next game, if you will. The Warriors now will probably a little bit light-handed without, I guess, Iggy is questionable or doubtful at this point. We're probably not going to see him. How does that affect the Warriors? And maybe could there be like a sliver of truth that there is a little more pressure on them as a result?
Take the pressure. I would take the pressure part out of it and just talk about how Iggy, the loss of Andre Iguodala, affects them. I think it potentially affects them greatly.
Yes, absolutely. It affects them on the offensive end. Affects him because he is a shooter. He is a shot maker. He's also a wing defender. So offense, defense on their rotation. What they typically do is they switch from 1-2 through the 5 position. That's one thing that they do and have done a great job of it. That's why they start the Hampton 5. It's not because all those guys met. It's because it's a better defensive assignment. And on the offensive end, they can spread the court more because Iggy is a better spot-up shooter. Their rotation off the bench. So we talked about offense, now defense, now their rotation off the bench. Who's the first guy off the bench now?
Right.
But Swaggy P? I mean, he's not the defender.
Swaggy P might have to start now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that any team in the Western Conference would love to see Swaggy P starting.
Absolutely.
Not known for his defense, doesn't have the necessarily length that Iggy has, and you have to start watching them. They're going to hunt him up and they're going to hunt Steph up. So now they're going to have two guys on the defense for the Warriors that they can hunt up.
And I want people to understand what Cece's saying when he says Iggy's more of a threat from the outside. You got to keep in mind, when Iggy starts, he's starting in place of Kevon Looney, JaVale McGee, or Zaza Pachulia. Nobody thinks Iggy's a dead-eye shooter, but if he's taking the place of your starting center, when none of their starting centers shoot threes, he absolutely is more of a threat from three.
He's not as good a shooter, spot-up shooter, Swaggy P, but he's a better ball handler.
Of course.
Better defender, and definitely a better passer.
And this is where the Warriors' odd roster construction can bite them a little bit. They could have found out 3 centers were doubtful for the game and been fine. When you talk about perimeter players, if you have the Hamptons 5 as your 5 starters, those are all, except for Draymond, perimeter-based players. Here's the entirety of the perimeter players on their bench. Swaggy P, Sean Livingston, and G-League call-up Quinn Cook. That's it. That's all of it, because they're carrying 6 centers for a reason that I don't understand. The team plays center less than anybody in the league. So if Iggy's out, maybe they'll start Kevon Looney. But still, your bench gets much, much shorter. The Rockets needed some reason to believe that the variables are going to be different than they were in Game 3. Iggy being out is not enough to make them a favorite in this game. It's not going to move the Vegas line a bit. But all of a sudden, if Steph gets in foul trouble, or if one of those other guys gets in foul trouble, now Nick Young's got to play big minutes, now Sean Livingston's got to do more than regular 15 minutes, that could be problematic for them.
All right, we'll talk more about this. But on the other side, let's get back into that series out east. Why can't the Celtics win on the road? Next, first things first. All right, to the NBA draft now. Reports are the Knicks have the hots for Oklahoma point guard Trae Young. Knicks have the 9th overall pick. CC, do you expect having the hots to turn into a relationship?
Man, I hope not. I hope not. I'm not in the small. When it comes to athletes, I want someone big. I believe there's other guys in the draft that potentially that you can get. As a point guard, do you see him matched up with Cris for the rest of his career? And, you know, to me, I don't see that in New York City. Fizdale said, as the head coach in his first press conference, they were going to be a defensive dominant team. So if you take him with the number 9, I don't know how you ever get to that.
You just need 4 other great defenders. I love this idea. I love this pairing, particularly if Kristaps is going to be a slow recovery with the injury. Listen,
he might not play in 2018-19.
Exactly my point. Take a year. Trae's going to take a ton of lumps his rookie year. If the Knicks are awful next year, who cares? I think a Trae Young, Kristaps, Porzingis combo, because of both of those guys being able to shoot from range, both those guys being unique prospects, is...
I think he has tremendous bust potential.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
All right, let's move on to Boogie Cousins.
Unless he hits a mid-life growth spurt.
DeMarcus is, quote, very interested in re-signing with the Pelicans. The star center is coming off a torn Achilles, missed the end of the season, and will be a free agent this offseason. Nick, should New Orleans bring Boogie back?
Man, I've been very consistent on this. Absolutely, they should. Now, it's going to ask Alvin Gentry to be able to coach this team 2 different styles, a style with Boogie on the court and a style with Boogie off the court. But you cannot lose a top 15 player in the league for nothing in the offseason. If you re-sign him and it doesn't work, you can trade him for something. But, yes, you have to bring him back even coming off the Achilles.
Alvin Gentry had some phenomenal things to say. He said every person in the organization that has been asked about Boogie Cousins bringing him back, 100% have said we're going to bring him back. So that's a great vote of confidence for Boogie. Boogie's out also, he might have to take a little less money.
Yep.
You know, so he's got to be able to work with the Pelicans to try to keep these two, him and the Brow, together, which is a special combination.
All right, finally, back to the Kawhi Leonard saga. According to reports, the Spurs hope to mend fences and offer Kawhi the Supermax contract. Just to remind folks, that would be $219 million over 5 years. CC, should the Spurs offer Kawhi the Supermax?
If you want Kawhi in a Spurs uniform, because there's no way he's in a Spurs uniform for anything less than that. So you got no chance of retaining Kawhi by not offering him the Supermax contract. That's what they should do. He's a Supermax player. Like, what's the question? Is he a top 5 player? Should he get a Supermax contract? Does he have a long-lasting injury that's going to hurt his career? If he doesn't have that, then it doesn't make sense for them not to offer him the Supermax.
I don't think it's quite as cut and dry as you're making it out to be because of what happened last year, but I would still offer him the Supermax. I would still, it's not.
How many players in the NBA do we have on a max contract?
Well, on a max contract, a lot. On the super max, only a handful, because you have to qualify for it.
Yes.
You have to either be league MVP or first team All-NBA. That's the way he qualified for it, was being first team All-NBA.
Who was the last guy that qualified for a super max that didn't get them super max?
No, nobody.
Oh.
No, nobody. But he's also the first guy to qualify it, and then in the following year only play less than 10 games and seemingly not want to be with the organization. That's why it's not.
That's the key. Seemingly not want to be with the organization, not sit on the bench. I know that you guys don't have an issue with this. It bothered me a little bit that he doesn't sit on the bench during the playoffs.
Oh, it bothered Jenna. I did have an issue with it for the home games.
And I know what you definitely did have an issue with was the game that Greg Popovich's wife passed away. The next 2 games after that, he wasn't on the bench either, and he wasn't. And I know that he spoke to Pop on the phone and somehow got this, blessing to not have to be there. That was what affected me a little bit.
But here's the thing that people need to understand with the Supermax contract. This is not a situation where Kawhi Leonard could sign it and then demand a trade. If you sign someone to the Supermax, you cannot trade them for a full year. So if he signs it, he is saying, I am back with the Spurs. I am re-upping with the Spurs. I would be nervous if that rule wasn't in place. That Kawhi would say, yeah, I'll sign, and then immediately say, trade me, I'm not coming in. But that's not available to him. So, listen, he is one of the 8 best players in the sport, even with the concerns about the injury. He is, without question, one of the 8 best players in the sport. He finished higher than LeBron in the MVP voting just a year ago. You can't not retain him if you have the opportunity to retain him.
And I could care less if he went to the game. You know what it meant? It meant zero. All right? They were a bad team. All right? The season was over with. He communicated with the coach. Him and the coach do have a relationship. Him and the coach probably have the only thing that's going to be able to potentially salvage the relationship, the communication that they've had with each other. There's no one else in the organization that can talk to Kawhi or try to build a reason with Kawhi. So him being in New York City, working with his doctors, rehabbing was the best thing for him. And it's better for the organization that he's getting healthy compared to sitting on the bench there with Alfred. What type of support? What was he going to do? Was he going to help him?
Well, whatever type of support it is, it's the type of support every other injured player in the playoffs is offering their team.
Okay, but so what?
You can say it doesn't matter. I get that.
It really doesn't matter.
Okay,
You think that's going to affect them offering him $200 million with Kawhi's resume? Because what's stronger, Kawhi's resume or him not being on the bench the last 4 games of the season?
I said I would offer him the money, but I can still say I think that, just like if Kyrie was not showing up to these playoff games, I would think it was a bad look, just like if Boogie wasn't showing up to the Pelicans playoff.
Right, but in the real world, it doesn't matter, though. Like, it doesn't matter that the guy's not there on the bench. Is it going to help the team? No. It is because as a fan, we want the guy there. In the locker room, it doesn't matter. To the players, it doesn't matter.
But whether it helps the team or not, would you say it affected the team? We did.
No, it didn't affect the team. They were a bad team.
Right, but we did hear, guys, Manu, we heard Tony Parker talk about how much they...
You know the reason why it didn't? Because they can't play. They can't play. Did you hear what his teammates said about him? Did you hear what Tony Parker said? How his injury was so much worse than... Oh, yeah, so I'm supposed to come there and support them? No, absolutely. It don't work that way. It don't work that way. You can say whatever you want about me when I'm out of town, and now all of a sudden you're getting ready to get your doors blown off. You want me to come support you? No, that's not getting ready to happen. All right? Ginobili's career is over with. Tony Parker, he says he wants to play. He's only a shell of himself. The Spurs better be worried about Kawhi, because the only way they're going to put another banner in the rafters, which is important to them, is if they have Kawhi Leonard.
All right, let's get back to the Celtics now. And I get it. Everything's just better at home. Your bed, your routine, your family. Road families are weird. Nobody knows about road woes more than the Celtics. No one. They're now just 1-6 in road playoff games this year. Put that up against a 9-0 home playoff record. Well, the series with the Cavs now tied at 2, shifts back to Boston tomorrow night. Here's head coach Brad Stevens.
It's the best 2 out of 3 to go to the NBA Finals. Doesn't get better than that. I mean, ultimately, anybody that didn't think this was going to be tough, everything is tough. And, in this deal, it's a blast to have to grit your teeth, get up off the mat, and go after it again. That's part of it. That's part of what makes these guys on both sides special. It's part of what makes the Western Conference team special. They're able to do it. They're able to block out everything that doesn't matter and go compete. And that's what we'll go do.
All right, Cris, are the Celtics' playoff woes, is that a sign of this team being young and inexperienced, the fact that they can't seem to put it all together when they're away from Boston?
It's a sign of a couple things. It's a sign of a young team because it's harder to play on the road. And it's a sign that absent of a superstar. Young guys, Jaylen Brown's not ready to be in the NBA superstar category. Tatum is not ready to be in that. Rozier is a backup player, could be a starting point guard somewhere, but that superstar status to be able to put out a fire when the team goes on a run, to be able to make a high-energy play, either a slam dunk, knock down a three, to be able to take energy out from being on the road when the home crowd is taking over the game. They don't have that. It's not a problem. They got two guys that are capable of doing that, and Gordon Hayward and Kyrie. They're injured. This is a team that is trying to get somewhere without their star player. So it makes sense that they would struggle on the road. We thought that the young players would struggle at home and on the road. At home, they played magnificent. And they played magnificent, their top three scorers going from the regular season to the postseason. But when you're playing against the best teams, when you're in Eastern Conference Final, Western Conference Final, these types of things can be exploited because the scouts look at your weaknesses and they target them. And you start to see more evidence of what you're weak at, what you're lacking. And that's what we're seeing with the Celtics.
And Jenna, I know you want Danny Ainge to watch the show. I don't know that he does, but Brad Stevens might, because you made a point last week that Brad Stevens then echoed over the weekend, which was this was the best road team in the Eastern Conference during the regular season, and now they can't do it during the playoffs. And the answer to that is, well, during the regular season for 65 of those games, you had the superstar. You had Kyrie Irving. You can't look at what they did on the road during the regular season and say, why can't they do it on the road in the playoffs? For a number of reasons, but one of them is it's not the same team that you were dealing with. But the other aspect of this, and this, go ahead.
But it's also not the same stage. So if you want to say there's no superstar, there's also not the, if you want to use, for lack of a better term, pressure of playing in the Eastern Conference Finals where there's a lot on the line and it can end your season. You also don't have that during the regular season.
Right, but I mean, there was less pressure, if you will, in the first round against Milwaukee. And they got beat down in the 3 games in Milwaukee, a team that is poorly coached, a team that has, much like the Cavs series, best player in the series on Milwaukee. Next 3 or 4 best guys are on Boston.
Yeah.
But the thing that's concerning, if I'm Brad Stevens or if I'm a Celtics fan, is I don't mind so much that at home we're scoring 112 points a game and on the road we're scoring 99 points a game. I care tremendously that at home we're allowing 101 and on the road we're allowing 111. Your defense should travel better than that. One of the reasons the Celtics in the regular season were, aside from Kyrie Irving, a good road team, is they had the #1 defense in the NBA. You talk all the time. Role player shots aren't going to go in as much. Young player shots aren't going to go in as much away from home. That shouldn't affect these 2 games in Cleveland. They have been disorganized defensively. They're always trying hard, but they're not communicating as well. That's what's concerning for Boston.
Man, Al Horford, their center. He played great. First round, great. Second round, great. You talk about potentially him and Brad Stevens being the MVP of this team. Game 1 and Game 2. But since Tristan Thompson's come in, he's shooting 27% against Tristan Thompson. That's a real thing. You shouldn't have a veteran player with a max contract on the road struggling the way he is. But he is your go-to guy. He's your go-to leader when you don't have Gordon Hayward, when you don't have Kyrie. So not having those guys shows up more on the road than it would in home games.
And you mentioned Tristan Thompson, and I've been president of the Brad Stevens fan club, or maybe vice president to our friend Chris Mannix. Ty Lue made the adjustment. Ty Lue said, I'm inserting Tristan Thompson in the starting lineup. People were curious about that.
It works.
Brad Stevens has not readjusted from there. So if I'm going to elevate you to one of, if not the best coach in basketball, you got to have a good counterpunch to lose counterpunch.
Yeah, to be the best coach in the NBA, which you said.
Right, absolutely.
You said he was.
I said he's the best coach of the NBA.
It's time to make some adjustments.
He thought he made that adjustment. Al Horford came out with a little bit more energy than he did last game, but it still wasn't enough.
Tristan Thompson's a tough matchup for him.
All right, coming up, should we be concerned about Tom Brady? We'll let you know why next. First things first. Welcome back to First Things First. Look who's here. Super Bowl champ Mark Schlereth.
Good to
Oh,
see
hello.
you
Oh, it's
guys.
great to see you.
It's always good to see you.
We have missed you tremendously.
What's up, Sting?
I've
long.
missed you guys. I know.
Too long. You got to move to New York. That's
Okay,
just,
we're in.
Talk to your family about that. So.
Talk to the bosses.
Hey, so among the many Patriots topics discussed since last you were here, Stink,
Yeah.
can Tom Brady still play football? Can Tom Brady still win a Super Bowl? And can Tom Brady be any cuter? That was my topic. These guys were not on board with that one.
No, I'm totally on board with you.
Okay, cool.
Those eyes.
So then we're good all around.
Yeah.
Today we present to you, can Tom Brady miss OTAs without criticism? Because he will reportedly not be at Patriots OTAs all week. Rob Gronkowski missed day one, but should be there when they finish up his contract this week. Mark, how big of a deal is Brady missing OTAs, though?
Well, from a work standpoint, it's not that big a deal at all because Tom Brady's Tom Brady, can still play, proves that every single year. The issue that I think is the bigger issue here is Tom Brady has always been the guy that Bill Belichick knows, if I can criticize Tom Brady, and if I can get into Tom Brady's butt in these meetings, then everybody has to follow suit. And this is the first time, because Tom Brady's always come to these voluntary workouts, this is the first time in over a decade that he's missed them. And so there's some tension, internal tension within this organization. They can put out press releases and everything else that says there's nothing to see here, but there certainly is something to see here. They're not happy, and it's the first time that Tom Brady, to me, hasn't followed suit and has circumvented his coach's authority by not showing up to this. So you can tell me there's no internal strife within the New England Patriots, but there's some internal strife. And multiple guys have come out and talked about the Butler benching during the Super Bowl, how upset they are about that. There's some internal strife going on right here. You know what cures it now? Starting off 6-0 will help you overcome some internal strife, but if things, I always say it doesn't matter until it matters. Like, you can roll through the season. If things start to slip through the cracks and you start to lose a few games, that's when guys start pointing backwards and saying, hey, man, remember this? Remember what he did over here? And those are the things that concern me about Tom Brady missing the OTAs.
Yeah, Stick makes some great points. Number one being, it's been part of Tom Brady's routine. And the most successful people that I know, in sport and out of sport, they're into a routine or a regimen. And that's what Tom Brady, now he's decided. In Tom versus Time, he gave us a little glimpse. He said, I'm going to do what I think is best going forward for my career. So right now, he feels like, as far as his career, which also means training with Alex Guerrero around the clock with no limitations or restriction. And it also means spending more time with his family, which is a real thing when you get to the age that Tom Brady is at, before you put yourself back into the grind of being back in New England. So I understand Tom. I respect it. I missed a lot of mini camps, OTAs, but it wasn't no big deal because
it was part of your routine.
Because I wasn't there. And I had just a good or a better training staff for a regiment that the team knew was successful, and we were going to do that in Florida, and there were a lot of other guys on the team there. So what we're seeing is a trickle-down effect from the Garoppolo demand on trading them, all right? The Guerrero being X'd out of the organization, Tom Brady losing Super Bowl 52, and what I'm going to do moving forward. That's what Tom Brady, for the first time that we're able to see as outsiders, Tom Brady being able to throw his weight around and get what he wants in New England.
Well, and we can't, the Garoppolo trade is a big moment of this as well, because this is also the first time in a number of years Tom Brady has, even if it's just cursory competition, no competition at the quarterback spot. They didn't draft a quarterback in the first round like a lot of us thought they would. They don't have Jimmy Garoppolo sitting there as a guy that people think is going to be the heir apparent. Not that anyone ever thought Brady was going to be
people
benched.
would argue the only competition that's ever been was when Drew Bledsoe was there, and Tom was young.
Sure.
Since then, they have not had a competent replacement for Tom Brady in Castle or even in Garoppolo.
Well, as
far as pressure.
I understand that nobody thought that he was going to get benched for those guys, but this is the first time in a long time that the guy behind him isn't the young guy the Patriots are hoping might one day take over for him. I'm all about the Malcolm Butler stuff. I think that's an enormous moment in this franchise's recent history. I don't think these OTAs have as much to do with the Malcolm Butler stuff. I think it has to do with what we saw in Tom versus Time, which is his family. Which is, I think that at 40 going on 41 years old, I think everyone that's married makes deals with their spouses. And I think your spouse is constantly saying, do you need to keep playing? You've had these concussions that she talked about publicly. We want more time with you. That the deal you make with your spouse is, honey, I am going to keep playing, but here's what I can give you. Just like he came out and said, we agreed on 2 more years. Maybe part of the agreement was also, I'm going to scale back some of those theoretically optional off-season activities, because we saw a much closer look in that documentary that Tom authorized on, had final cut on, of his relationship with his wife and his children than I had seen before. So I think he is throwing his weight around to a degree, but I think this is less about anger towards the organization and more about trying to keep his home life happy, which at least I can empathize with. I can see that being the case.
You don't continue to play. Listen, it's not about Sundays. Sundays, I can't remember, who was it that said it?
You can will you out there.
Right. Sundays, like, I can't remember who said it, but they said, hey, man, I think it was Marvin Harrison said, I play for free.
Right.
They pay me to practice Monday through Saturday. It's not about Sundays. You'll show up on Sunday and you'll play all day long. It's your willingness to prepare Monday through Saturday. And if you are sick of the guy that's constantly grinding on you, and you've said as an organization and as a quarterback, I have consistently taken less than my value to make sure that we could manage the cap properly, and in return, I get a benching of Malcolm Butler. I'm sitting here going, you cost me a Super Bowl. I mean, I'd be upset with that as well. And I think there's a lot of players that have voiced their opinion on that. So I think there's a combination, and I agree with you with the family and all those things. He's still going to grind, but I don't need to listen to that dude grind on me in the offseason, because I know what a grind it's going to be during the regular season.
Or is it that at the end of the day, the way you said, CC, you loved your off-season training, and I'm sure you had the blessing of the Vikings organization when you were training. He doesn't have the blessing of the Patriots organization to go off and do it the exact way he wants to. Guerrero isn't welcome there with an office to work on him every single day as much as he wants. Mm-hmm. How much of this is the fact that he's getting older? He wants to do it his way with his guy, and maybe a little bit of resentment towards the organization.
I think that's that part of the deal as well. And for anybody who says, well, I don't know about the Garoppolo thing, listen, I was in a meeting with the Niners who said we pursued Garoppolo at the combine.
Yep.
They said absolutely not. We pursued him in the preseason. They said absolutely not. We pursued him in the regular. We had given up, and all of a sudden the phone rings 2 days before the trade deadline. Bill Belichick called. He said, hey, yes, you still want him? He's yours. Bam.
And only a second-round pick.
Right. So, I mean, there has been a rift within that organization. Regardless of what they say, there has been just some controversy in there.
I know it's not Belichick's way. It might not be the Patriot way, but it seems like every time we talk about anything going on with the Patriots, one thing that gets brought up is the Malcolm Butler benching. Is there any way for him to diffuse that situation?
Yes, absolutely. You have to swallow your pride. You don't have to do it in public, but you have to have your team in there and say, in hindsight, I thought I was doing the right thing. I screwed up. I apologize. I don't know if that's in his. I don't know if that's in him, and it may be. It may be, but I'll tell you one thing. I played for one of the most regal men in all of professional football, and Joe Gibbs. I mean, one of the most regal men. And if Joe Gibbs, we lost a game. We started off the season 11-0 in 1991. We lost a home game to the Dallas Cowboys. And you know how it is when you lose. You know, the coaches come in and pound you and say, hey, you guys didn't execute this. 100% responsibility. I didn't coach you guys. I screwed up. This is on me. And went to the media and said, 100% on me. And as a player, when you have a coach that's willing to accept some responsibility and to basically tell you guys, listen, man, I screwed up. Because you think the egos are big in the locker room, walk upstairs to the coaches' offices. You want to talk about some of the biggest egos you have ever seen in your entire life. Just walk upstairs. And I'm telling you, to have a coach that's willing to basically own up to those mistakes is huge as a player. The amount of respect that is developed between player and coach when they're willing to say, man, I own that one. That's me.
Yeah, and I don't think that's going to happen in New England.
I don't think so either.
Because that's just not the way they do things.
Right.
And it could have been addressed. There's a number of players that have already left the organization, so you're not going to be able to get that full message to the roster. But Tom Brady and some of those other veteran players, they did deserve some type of answer. And I just believe the way Belichick went about it was the wrong way.
All right, Mark. Stick around. Coming up, will we see Baker Mayfield on the field week 1 in Cleveland? Next on First Things First. Back here on First Things First with Mark Schlereth. Kudos to the city of Cleveland for making our show twice today. Cavs making the moves, Browns trying to make the moves. Browns started OTAs yesterday. All eyes were on first overall pick, Baker Mayfield. However, Tyrod Taylor, who the Browns traded for back in March, is still projected to be the starter for now. The veteran quarterback spoke about how he's approaching this QB battle.
Whoever was taken doesn't necessarily bother me or, like I said, welcome them to the team. But my mindset when I first came into the league is prepare each and every day as a starter and continue to keep pushing yourself. And now I'm here to help turn this organization around and help win games, and I'm looking forward to doing that.
All right, Mark, talk to us a little bit about Tyrod Taylor's position, because he coming off the season he had in Buffalo. He comes here, he wants new life, but then they go ahead and they draft a guy like Baker Mayfield, and he knows he's right on his heels as soon as he probably gets this offense, learned and ready to get out there and run.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that are interesting here. First off, it wasn't like he didn't know when he signed with Cleveland that they were going to draft a quarterback.
Yes.
So he knew what he was getting into. Now, I know this as a former player. Draft whoever you want, because there is nobody as good as me. So I'm like, I welcome the competition. I'll teach you everything I know, because you can't execute it the way I can execute it. So I've always felt that way. Now, eventually he understands that he'll probably be replaced. But remember, he's a playoff quarterback from last year with the Buffalo Bills, okay? That was one of the longest playoff droughts in history. So he has something to his resume. So that's important. The other thing is, you watch Baker Mayfield, and Baker Mayfield was incredible in college. And he's a much better pocket guy than I had anticipated him being. But he took, I believe, 6 snaps from under center his entire career. And you talk to quarterbacks who make that transition, we make it like, oh, it's no big deal. 60% of the offense in the NFL is run out of shotgun.
Well, 99.9% of Baker's offense was run out of shotgun.
Right, but I'm saying there's still 40% that's not. So what you have to understand is every route combination ties up to the footwork that you have from under center in play action. Now, you take shotgun runs. You can eliminate 60% of your offense. You can't run the runs you want to run out of shotgun. 60% of your runs are out the window, which means 60% of your play action is out the window in shotgun. So you have to, in the NFL, in our game, you have to play some from under center. And that's a tough transition. Do I open up? Do I reverse pivot out? It's a 3-step drop. Is it a quick 5? Is it a short 5? Is it a long 5? It's all those things, because the routes time up exactly to that footwork out from underneath center and that play action stuff. And guys struggle, because think about this now. All of a sudden, you're not thinking about the defense that you're supposed to be reading.
Yep.
You have to turn your back to it and play action. You're not thinking about the defense you're supposed to be reading. You're not thinking about the route combination. You know what you do? You're counting steps. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's what these guys do, and it is, I can't tell you how tough that is, and I've never done it, but I've had plenty of guys tell me, dude, all I can think about is this a long 3-step? Is it a quick 3-step? Is it a long 5? Do I have to speed up my 5-step drop based on we're throwing all hook and we've got the proper leverage, so now I got to be quicker? You know, all these different things that go on, and that's what they're thinking about. They're not thinking about, hey, what defense are they in? This is why that's such a tough transition. So Tyrod Taylor, back to him, he knows he's got about 6 games.
Oh, wow.
Right? He knows he's got 6 games. Now, if I'm really good in those 6 games, guess what? I'm going to get more. If not, you know what? Hey,
nice
good
to meet you, Baker.
Good meeting you.
Yeah.
Good luck.
I think the point you made at the very beginning is an important one to consider when we talk about Tyrod. Tyrod was not going to have 10 teams that he could sign with, but he was going to have more than one. This is a guy that had a 90 quarterback rating over the last 3 years, a little better than that on average. In his NFL career, he's thrown nearly 3 times as many touchdowns to interceptions. And like you said, despite being benched midseason inexplicably for Nathan Peterman, led the Bills to the playoffs. He signed with the team he knew was going to draft a quarterback #1 overall. And the difference I would compare to when they drafted a guard when you were playing or whatever is, obviously there's only one quarterback. And if you're drafted #1 overall, you're becoming the starter at some point. You might not become the starter forever. It could be a Tim Couch situation and lose the job, but you're becoming the starter at some point. But what Tyrod also has going for him is this. I mentioned the touchdown interception numbers for a reason. If you watched the Browns last year, the Browns, I know they didn't win again. I get it. But they also were actually not a terrible team between the 20s. And then Deshaun Kaiser, I don't have his red zone turnover numbers in front of me, but I know at least at the midway point, he was on pace to smash the all-time NFL record for turnovers inside the scoring zone. Like the Browns need someone, at least early in the year, I feel, that they know is not going to cripple them when they are about to get points. That's something Tyrod has going for him as well. Even if they like the high-end talent of Baker Mayfield, it's one of the reasons I think Tyrod has a good shot of being the Week 1 starter.
Stink, you're right about when they draft these players, because every year they're drafting players to replace you. And it might be a little bit different if you're a quarterback, but it's still the same mentality.
Yes.
I'm going to hold down this position. I got bills to pay. I got a contract. No one's going to replace me until they get someone with more talent. That's when you get replaced. And that's with Tyrod. That's his situation. There is someone behind him who's got more arm talent than him. He's got a bigger upside than him. And the Browns don't have the luxury of being able to be patient and wait on Tyrod to get in sync with all the new personnel he's going to have. Baker Mayfield is going to be the starting quarterback of the Cleveland Browns. All right? That's a foregone conclusion. Why Tyrod? He's just not that good. He's undersized. He doesn't have a big arm. He doesn't throw the ball into traffic a lot. So, yeah, his touchdown to interception ratio, it is good, but he doesn't take a lot of chances with the football. And it's hard to win, and it's hard to win on third down when you don't take chances. Now, I believe Cleveland, with Todd Haley taking over as offensive coordinator, removing the play calling from the head coach for the first time, I believe they're going to be more aggressive, and I believe it's going to lead to Baker Mayfield playing early in Cleveland.
Who's got a bigger learning curve here? Tyrod, who's only been with the team a few more months than Baker has, but also Baker, who played a much different game in college.
Yeah, there is no comparison, a college kid coming into an NFL locker room compared to a guy who's been with a couple different organizations.
Right.
Tyrod's got 4 great years backing up there in Baltimore. He's got a couple years of starting there in Buffalo. Even though he's getting used to the personnel, the terminology, what he knows about pro football, I mean, it's like encyclopedias compared to Baker Mayfield. It's like one sheet of paper.
Yeah, the concepts are the concepts. The concepts are universal. Like, I mean, Z-drive is Z-drive is Z-drive, regardless of what you call it. It's still Z-drive, right?
I'm getting ready to cut a guy's knees.
Right. So it's still that concept. You may call it something different, but he's been through those concepts. Sure. You coming out of a college spread offense where a lot of the routes that you throw are one receiver routes. Hit that guy, let's roll. So it's there's a difference there.
Let me just ask you one quick follow-up question. To overcome everything you're talking about the coming out of center and understanding the drops, what does Baker need to do? Because that's going to be there, right? He's going to be at a deficit there. Right. What does he need to do in training camp and preseason to overcome that to where he could be, as a lot of people think he'll be, the Week 1 starter?
It's just reps. It's reps or reps or reps. But the more reps you get, the more comfortable you will become, and the less you have to think. And the more you think, the more paralysis by analysis there is. So you've got to get to that point. But when you're trading reps or sharing reps, that's reps you're not getting.
And one thing I can say about Baker and some of the other guys in this year's draft, they did a great job after the bowl game getting with quarterback gurus that they worked on that before he went to the NFL team.
Football acumen is big with him, though. And he was the one guy talking to the Broncos who had him in the Senior Bowl that said they could give him stuff in the morning and Baker would take it out to the practice field and execute it that afternoon.
Photographic memory is what the Cleveland staff thought he had.
See, you'd make a great starting quarterback, Nick.
I don't have a photographic memory. You keep saying that. I got nothing close to that.
I got to take. You'd be terrible in the NFL.
I'd pay a lot of money for
terrible in the NFL.
It'd be great.
Mark Schlereth, as always, great insight, great stuff. Love having you here. Come back soon.